now let's turn to evaluating the state reporting process based on the case study. I have here a copy of the readings that I assigned to you, and I'll refer to them as I go through some of the opportunities that the state reporting process provides, as well as some of the challenges. So I'll list a few of those on the screen and then discuss them. First are delays in submitting the state report. You may have noticed that the period that elapsed between the Sudan's second periodic report in 1997 and its third periodic report was nearly a decade. So that's quite a long time before a state is reviewed with respect to its implementation of a human rights treaty. And the delay is often attributed to the state, but it's also attributed to the fact that there are some 160 plus countries that are members of the ICCPR, and even more countries that are members of other human rights treaties. And so there is a backlog in the review process. During this time, there was quite a significant change in Sudanese law. That was the adoption of the interim national constitution in 2005, and that comes up in the reporting process itself. So delays are one concern, although the time period between the third and the fourth periodic report, 2007 and 2012, was only 5 years, so half as long. So the first challenge, delays in the reporting process. The second thing I want to talk about are some of the benefits and risks of shadow reports. So the way the document works is you can see the Sudan's report to the committee, followed by, on the bottom of page 2, an NGO's alternative report dealing with the right to liberty and security of the person, and then a brief, on page 3, a brief overview of what happened in the public session between the UN Human Rights Committee and the government delegation from the Sudan. And you can see immediately, there's quite a difference between the perspective of the Sudanese government and that of the NGO, in particular with regard to how long individuals can be detained and whether or not they have access to an attorney, to relatives, to medical professionals if they are needed. And so there's a division of views here. And in part, this is reflected in the conversation, of which there's just a summary here, between the committee members and the delegates. So if the committee were just relying on the official report, it might not know that there were credible allegations of longer periods of detention or detention in poor conditions. The next issue that I want to take up relates to the content of the committee's concluding observations. And you see those on the bottom of page 3 onto the top of page 4. Here, the committee begins by commenting on some of the positive aspects of the state's report, some of the progress it has made, including notably the interim constitution that provides for the protection of human rights. That's one way of enhancing implementation to make rights part of a national constitution. But with respect to areas of concern and recommendations for future action, on page 4, you see here that the committee adopts largely the views of the NGOs that the duration of detention in custody could be prolonged by as much as 6 months and perhaps even longer. And you see in italics the committee's recommendation to the Sudanese government to both ensure that the rules on the books with respect to detention are respected and that those rules are in fact followed in practice. And the committee invites the Sudan to, in its next report, submit more detailed information on how the rights of detainees are being respected. Now, we do have from 2012 the fourth periodic report of the Sudan, and I'd note here that with respect to the issue of follow-up on the recommendations of the treaty body, that you do see a rather different tone in this excerpt of the Sudanese report that I provided to you, an attempt to respond quite specifically to some of the concerns identified by the Human Rights Committee in the third periodic report with respect to the Sudan. Now, the Sudan begins by talking about a number of legal issues that, however, do not include the issues under Article 9 of the ICCPR, which governs the right to liberty and security of the person. So here you'll note one additional challenge that the reporting process faces, and that is that there may be multiple areas of human rights difficulties, and the state may have to pick and choose in focusing on some of the most pressing problems, but not addressing others. That, I think, is perhaps a reality, although it doesn't mean that the right to liberty and security was ignored during the fourth periodic report of the Sudan. That's not, in fact, true at all. You can see also on page 5 the Sudan referring to a number of recent developments relating to duties given to the Directorate General of Prisons and Reform, relating to a Minister of Justice order to monitor the custodial facilities in which detainees are housed. But it's a fairly, I would say, thin response, lacking in some detail. And it also notably omits any information about a more recent statute, the 2010 National Security Act, which you see mentioned on the bottom of page 5, where the committee says under that law, the government has wide powers of arrest and detention and might be able to detain suspects for up to 4 months. And the committee invites additional information from the state party, from the Sudan, with respect to that particular issue. So again, through the reporting process, the law has evolved and changed and perhaps become more human rights compliant, but there are still challenges that remain. And those challenges will be taken up by the committee when it considers the Sudan's fourth periodic report, which will occur in July of 2014. So that gives you an overview of the state reporting process and the cycle of reporting. And it's a quite common and quite important process for monitoring the implementation of a state's human rights treaty obligations. I'll leave you with some additional sources on the slide for how you can find out more about the treaty bodies and the treaty body strengthening process that is currently occurring within the UN human rights system.